Natlan has certainly been a breath of fresh air in terms of ingenuity in Genshin Impact. From breaking up its main Archon quest chapter with an interlude, to splitting the reputation into 6 independent factions, the Land of Fire feels like the start of a departure from the conventional and expected patterns of Teyvat's previous nations. I mean, if you don't believe me, we can also talk about Saurians and the Night Soul mechanic too, and to be honest, all of this is expected, since HoYoverse are clearly preparing to enter a new era of Genshin Impact. I, for one, do not expect the upcoming nations of Snezhnaya and Khaenri'ah to follow the established patterns either. However, despite this knowledge in mind, there is one pattern-breaking change in Natlan which, for the lack of a better term, makes no sense. And that is the inability of the Traveler to obtain additional elements corresponding to the authority of the nation's god, in this case, Pyro. In the past, I postulated that the absence of the Pyro Traveler from the opening acts is a result of Xbalanque and Mavuika dividing the Archon's duties amongst themselves, where Mavuika holds the Gnosis, hence her Statue of the Seven, while Xbalanque kept the authority of fire required for the Traveler to resonate with. And the gist of my idea was that Mavuika would eventually arrange for the Traveler to meet Xbalanque, ultimately allowing them to attain mastery over Pyro as a byproduct of that. But now we know that this is not the case, since Mavuika confirmed her possession of the authority of fire when she stated that it was what allowed her to unleash Renova's power against the Abyss Heart Gosoithoth at the end of the Rainbow, Destined to Burn. It also doesn't help that as time passes, as much as people will hate hearing this, it looks less and less likely for Xbalanque to be playable. Or is he? Well, actually that happens to be one of the questions I plan to tackle in this video, as it is surprisingly relevant to the main topic at hand. So, now that we are edging closer and closer to the eventual release of the Pyro Traveler, I will once again throw my hat in the ring in a final attempt to not only answer why the Traveler hasn't acquired the Pyro element yet, but also how they will get it, and, as a bonus, what this Pyro Traveler will look and play like in a complete analysis of lore, story, and gameplay. First and foremost, let's address one of the questions circulating the most around this topic, which is whether the Traveler will become the next Pyro Archon and by extension inherit the Pyro Sovereign's authority that way. While we can't entirely rule out this possibility since it can lead to some very interesting routes with the Tsaritsa and the Pyro Gnosis, if you are to weigh in all of the different variables, you will notice that this outcome closes so many more doors than it opens. As one of the 4 Descenders, akin to the Heavenly Principles, the Traveler is slated for a much more important role than Archonhood, to become the Master of Fate, the Weaver of the Threads of Destiny. This is the right that Dainsleif will challenge them for at the very end of the world, so them becoming Natlan's Archon would ironically undermine their ultimate destination. The entire story so far has been about the Traveler's journey across Teyvat. It is the main motivation given to them by the Abyss sibling, who said that at the end of their journey, they would come to understand everything. After all, the main character's title is The Traveler. And while it can potentially be cool to see them encounter a difficult choice where they forsake their original goal in order to step up and take on a new role and responsibility, the duties of the Pyro Archon would inevitably tie the main character down to a single nation. Thus, I don't see the Traveler taking on the role of an Archon, but who says that the role even matters? Out of the 7 Archons, Morax and Barbatos have effectively detached themselves from their positions, with Morax willingly handing in his Gnosis to the Fatui in a contract with the Tsaritsa, while Focalors literally detached her head from her body and gave the Gnosis and the Hydro Authority to Neuvillette. Of course, there is also the Tsaritsa, who in her rebellion against the Divine has clearly abandoned Celestia, leaving her as an Archon only by name. I am saying this because the Traveler will eventually need access to the authority of fire to resonate with its element, but regardless of whether this is accomplished through sharing or complete acquisition, the ruler of Natlan is likely to remain Mavuika. However, that is only one possibility out of many, and I personally still have a couple more to discuss. For instance, aside from the Pyro Authority, one extremely straightforward alternative for the Traveler to gain access to the Pyro element would be through the Pyro Gnosis. So far, the way the Traveler has been accumulating new elemental powers from every nation they visit is by resonating with the respective ancient dragon authorities of each element they acquire. This process is facilitated using the statues of the Seven, which act as proxies for the gods currently in possession of every draconic authority. These statues of the Seven, just like the teleport waypoints, are hooked up to Tevat's ley lines, the network through which all elemental energy flows in the physical realm. Natlan, though, uniquely lacks any deep-rooted ley lines since its original network was severely damaged long ago in the war between the First Descender and the Ancient Dragons. Consequently, the land was left with the Night Kingdom constructed by Yualtekuten with the aid of Renova and Xbalanque. It's safe to assume that the absence of conventional ley lines in Natlan is the reason behind the Traveler's inability to resonate with Mavuika's statue and tap into the Pyro Sovereign's authority. This presents an obstacle but also a perfect opportunity for HoYoverse to show us what happens when the Traveler obtains a new element through the Pyronosis instead of the ancient dragon authorities they have used so far. Even though I doubt that this will actually happen, I am genuinely curious to see how that would turn out in practice, since the Seven Gnosis are fragments carved out of the Third Descender by the Usurper King and the Second Who Came. So as the Fourth Descender, it isn't far-fetched to expect the Traveler to be compatible with such power. Moreover, it would be very interesting to see how the power of a Gnosis manifests. Based on Nouvellette, we know that the Traveler's elemental abilities resemble those of the Dragon Sovereigns whose elements they are borrowing. So gaining Pyro through a Gnosis would grant us valuable insight into the nature of the Third Descender's abilities and potentially even who they were. The last method I have for the Traveler to obtain the Pyro element, and this is the one I think is the most likely, would be through their ancient name in the Night Kingdom and the first god of war, Xbalanque himself. The distinguishing factor between the Traveler and the Abyss sibling on Tevat is the fact that the World Tree Irminsul has records of the siblings' history as if they belonged to the continent. But all of this is going to dramatically change very soon. The Lord of the Night, Yualtekuten, offered the Traveler a Pilgrim's Chronicle to document their memories across Natlan. And once Xilonan forges their ancient name, the Traveler's story and legacy will be recorded in the Night Kingdom. Now, it's worth noting that the Night Kingdom is a realm localized to the land of Natlan, making it largely independent from the rest of Tevat's ley lines. Even so, this act would still cement the Traveler's history on Tevat, given that Natlan remains part of it. We know that in version 5.3, the Traveler and Mavuika are going to partake in a final counterattack against the Abyss to drive it off the Night Kingdom once and for all. The way I see this battle playing out involves the duo initially failing to quell the abyssal infestation, whether that is due to the immense concentration of enemies or because of an incredibly powerful void entity whom they can't defeat is not too important. The point I am making is that they will face an insurmountable challenge, like a dragon in the classical hero's journey narrative. Of course, the quote-unquote dragon here is metaphorical. It represents the final foe, the strongest enemy whom the hero must overcome to obtain the treasure and/or help their people. We've seen this concept play out several times in Genshin Impact. In Mondstadt, the final enemy was Dvalin, an actual dragon. In Liyue, it was the god Osial, who might also be somewhat of a dragon ? In Inazuma, we had Beelzebul and the Shogun puppet. In Sumeru, it was Scaramouche, or even a Pep depending on how you want to look at it. And most recently in Fontaine, the dragon was the star-devouring Narwhal. All in all, Mavuika and the Traveler are gonna get their cheeks clapped at the start in order to open up an opportunity for the Traveler to attain character growth. You see, another major figure in the hero's journey narrative who usually shows up either right before or shortly after the confrontation with the evil dragon is the Wise Master. This is typically the old sensei who shares his or her experience, knowledge, and secrets with the young hero. And in this case, the sensei is probably going to be Xbalanque. The description of the Agnedes Agate gemstone hints at some sort of significant exchange or succession that will be taking place between two individuals whom I believe are going to be the Traveler and Xbalanque. Mavuika says that following Ualtekuten's construction of the Night Kingdom, the first Pyro Archon used his power to support and strengthen the realm. This statement is important for a couple of reasons. The first time we ever hear about him, Xbalanque is called, by the developers mind you, the one entombed with the primal fire, and during his lifetime he possessed a tremendous mastery over phlogiston. According to Citlali, the Lord of the Night constantly draws power from the primal fire in order to sustain her domain, so given the aforementioned details, it's pretty clear that Xbalanque did something to facilitate the supply of power from the primal fire to the Night Kingdom. Now, I won't waste time on the specific details since we are going to learn about them very soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if the God of War's will or consciousness still persists somewhere between the Sacred Flame and the Land of the Dead. Thus, I highly suspect that during their battle against the Abyss in the Night Kingdom, the Traveler inherits Xbalanque's will, and with it, the first man god is going to pass down his mastery over the primal fire, which is effectively the primordial form of the pyro element. Those were my personal predictions for the story and lore of how the Traveler will end up acquiring their pyro powers. Now, I want to use the rest of this video to discuss the Pyro Traveler's potential kit and overall abilities along with how I think their gameplay should look like. Before I delve too deep into this section of the video, I do need to remind you that based on consistent development patterns, version 5.3 is expected to introduce 2 new artifact sets into the game, and while I have absolutely no clue what those sets are gonna do, we should still acknowledge the possibility that they might be designed around new playstyles, with the Pyro Traveler's kit being catered towards those mechanics. And yes, I am aware of how ironic this disclaimer sounds given that I started this video by talking about how Natlan broke almost every pattern in Genshin, but this pattern in particular significantly affects how people spend their resin, so I don't think HoYoVerse will alter it. That being said, Natlan is the nation of pattern breaking. Who knows, the developers might just delay the artifacts until the volcano area in 5.4. Putting all general design expectations aside, one thing I strongly believe with the Pyro Traveler is that no matter their role, they need to be good at it. And when I say good, I don't mean good as in the Dendro Traveler, that is a low bar. That's like asking the Trailblazer to pick the shiniest trash can in Star Rail. I'm sorry, we don't do that here. So when I say good, people are gonna laugh at this. I think they should be at least on par with characters like Bennett, Yelan, and Fischl, which, yeah, I get it, it sounds like I'm huffing a truckload of copium right now, but when you actually look at it, it's not that big of an ask. I get that there is a lot of hype around the Pyro Traveler, since we have been waiting for them for considerably longer than usual, along with the fact that this character is seemingly being built up for an important moment in the game's story. But even all that is not the main issue. The real problem lies with the likelihood of the Pyro Traveler using the artifact set, Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City, which is so good on its own to the point where if the Pyro Traveler happens to be bad with it, they would literally have to be a walking pile of garbage. I mean, you are talking about a set that can give the entire team a 40% elemental damage boost just by virtue of its holder existing with a Night Soul. That's such an incredibly generous baseline for any character to start with. Then you factor in the fact that the sword weapon class to which the Traveler belongs houses a number of extremely good supportive options, such as the Key of Kajnesut, Peak Patrol Song, Favonia's Sword, Sapwood Blade, Sacrificial Sword, Xiphos' Moonlight, and Freedom Sworn, and you can quickly see how unbelievably hard HoYoVerse needs to fumble this character for them to not be good. In terms of the type of kit I would like the Pyro Traveler to have, the first thing that comes to mind is them being a good alternative to Bennett or Xiangling, two extremely dominant characters who have long overstayed their welcome as the only candidates for their jobs. Especially Xiangling. This character has become more of a hindrance than a blessing in many of the teams where she is played, just by virtue of being the only viable option. If they choose to go down this route, HoYoVerse have a few ways to design the Pyro Traveler. They could, for instance, make them a reasonably balanced mixture of Bennett and Xiangling that provides a small attack buff in tandem with highly reliable off-field pyro application. However, generally speaking, when a character tries to be a jack of all trades, they end up excelling at nothing and instead become less appealing than the alternatives who do one specific thing very well. The better way to go about this is by doing what HoYoverse already tried with Furina. Instead of having her directly compete with the exact same role as Yelan and Xingqiu, the developers focused her power budget on a kit unique from the other two, yet could still be applicable in similar situations. If you ask me, I would really love for the Pyro MC to be a Pyro version of Yelan. I genuinely believe that this would be the right design choice, since that would make the Traveler a single target Pyro applier as opposed to Xiangling, who works in AoE. Also, a Pyro Yelan, if done right, can be a super good and interesting unit to play around with in different teams. The other design pathway I see with the Pyro Traveler is as a Bennett side grade, I suppose, although I would really hope for a Pyro Yelan. Benny Boy is both an extremely powerful and popular character, easily one of the best units in the game due to the sheer variety of situations where his abilities come in handy. And man, do they come in handy. I mean, let's just list his benefits out and see. Bennett has easy and reliable pyro application for setting up team reactions at the start of a rotation. He provides the biggest attack buff in the entire game. He can heal, he can cleanse, he can act as a battery for pyro units when needed. He provides a 15% pyro damage buff. He can give all melee units a pyro infusion, and he can equip Noblesse Oblige or Instructor's artifact sets for either a bonus attack or elemental mastery boost. And all of that is without mentioning the various gimmicks and techniques he has with characters such as Kazuha, Xianyun, Jean, and Furina. This guy is a beast. Nonetheless, although he seems flawless without context, Bennett still has his own glaring weaknesses, and it is these weaknesses which HoYoverse can capitalize on to make the Pyro Traveler an alternative that doesn't directly power creep or underperform Bennett, but provides benefits which Bennett otherwise lacks. Okay, so Bennett's biggest selling point is his attack buff. It's primarily why he is used. Therefore, an attack buff of some sort will also have to be the main selling point of the Pyro main character, or PMC for short. On the other hand, Bennett's biggest restriction is the fact that all of his buffs and healing are locked inside a relatively small circle. This limitation has been the source of ire and annoyance for countless players over the years. It is infamously responsible for the creation of the meme term Circle Impact, which we are all familiar with today. The glaring weakness that is Circle Impact immediately presents our hypothetical PMC with an advantage. Make their attack buff a unit position tracking one that isn't limited to a stationary zone. I know guys, I know, that is such an advanced high IQ suggestion I am making here, but sometimes, for the sake of advancing our species, we must be brave. We need to venture into the unknown, where no one before us has dared go. We need to think outside of the box, or the circle in this case. Because remember, the ones who end up changing the world are those insane enough to think they can. Modern problems require modern solutions. But I'm not done yet. Let's make it a little bit more spicy. Outside of units that can snapshot his buff, Bennett can only really buff the active character within his field. Now, for the sake of the argument, let's say the PMC offers a significantly smaller buff. For example, 1/2 to 2/3 of what Bennett gives, which is somewhere between 50% to approximately 67%. But instead of applying to one unit at a time, it just instantly triggers on the entire team. When it comes to whether PMC should have other utilities like healing, stamina refund, or damage reduction, this honestly doesn't concern me very much, as I am primarily focusing on the core kit itself. Although I just thought about it right now, even if the Pyro Traveler doesn't heal or provide defensive utility, they can still have an advantage over Bennett in a weird roundabout way. Alongside his healing, Bennett also applies a Pyro Aura to his team, which acts as a cleanse against elemental debuffs. But at the same time, this Pyro Aura can become a source of damage amplification for enemy attacks, increasing the damage which your own characters receive if enemies land elemental attacks, which proc reactions like Overload, Melt, or Vaporize. Oh, and also, you get completely cucked if the enemy applies Dendro, which we have in the current Abyss as we speak. Some enemies can even outright one-shot you with a single attack inside Bennett's Elemental Burst. Don't believe me? Go and try it against the Hydro Tulpa. It's currently also on floor 12 of the Spiral Abyss. Wow, What a friendly list of enemies for Bennett we've got this time around. Don't get me wrong though, Bennett is still really good, and he's always going to be good thanks to how accessible and cheap he is to build. But after 4 years of the exact same two characters dominating the support roles of the Pyro element, it's time for a change, goddammit. Some teams are in need of more streamlined alternatives that can more smoothly fit into their playstyles. And before anyone brings up Chevreuse, yes, she is an incredibly good Pyro unit that is on par with Bennett in terms of value. She is a healer, an enemy debuffer, and a team buffer. But Chevy has her own niche in Overload with Electro and Pyro, so in that regard, she is competing with Kazuha and Farina rather than Bennett. As a matter of fact, one could even double down on this, because Bennett can be, and is often used, with both Chevy and Farina for even bigger buffs, and obviously I don't need to mention Bennett's historical synergy with Kazuha. The two form one of the most iconic duos in the game, even more so than what he's got going with Xiangling. Yeah, overall, HoYoverse have an excellent opportunity to make the Traveler a great Pyro support that capitalizes on currently missing mechanics or utilities in the element. Hey, like I said, just give me Pyro Yelan and I will be a happy, happy man. However, that's what I believe should happen. Now, whether I actually think the developers will finally give us a top-tier Traveler is a whole different conversation. No, I don't. My expectations for that can be found in the dumpster behind McDonald's. Yes, I reused the same meme from my last video, thanks for noticing. Regardless, one can always hope and cope. Who knows, perhaps this time around Genshin's developers will realize that perhaps making their main character the laughingstock of gacha games isn't actually a good idea. Both Honkai Star Rail and Wuthering Waves are extremely good gacha games, and they provide their players with strong main characters. Especially the Harmony Trailblazer, who has been a famous staple in Super Break teams, which is a very strong team archetype in Star Rail. Aether and Lumine are extremely interesting characters. In the past, they were royalties of a distant world that got annihilated by an unknown calamity. Both siblings have talented voice actors who get next to no time to shine, and I am probably a minority in what I'm about to say, but in terms of baseline character design, I actually like Aether and Lumine far more than almost any other playable character in Genshin so far. Anyway, given that we are approaching the endgame of Genshin Impact's Tevat chapter with both Snezhnaya and Khaenri'ah, it's time for the Traveler to start taking on a significantly more prominent role in terms of gameplay. I want to log in and actually look forward to using the main character, and I am sure many others would say the same. Regardless though, at this point in time, the developers are most likely already done with both the story and kit design of the Pyro Traveler, so all that there is left to do is sit back and see how it's gonna turn out. These were my personal predictions and thoughts on the Pyro Traveler. If you have any additional thoughts on either the lore and story we will be getting for the main character in version 5.3, or if you have any cool ideas for what you hope their kit should look like, then feel free to share them down in the comments. At any rate, we have reached the end of this video. As always, huge thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, and thank you all for watching till here. For now, I've been My Name for Now, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.